Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and hello everybody. My name is Amir and today I would like to talk about the situation in Southwest Asia. Today I will start with Iran's incredible adaptability that has been displayed for the past couple of weeks, if not since the beginning of the second imposed war in late February 2026. We know that China has provided a vast amount of military assistance to Iran. The specifics as of yet are unclear, but it has been confirmed that Iran has switched to Baidu instead of utilizing the American GPS system that it was used to use. During Operation Rising Lion in 2025, Iran launched missiles at Israel which utilized GPS. This allowed the US to spoof the missiles by providing them with false coordinates. The second imposed war saw Iran switch to Baidu. The accuracy increase was dramatic and contributed directly to the loss of almost every US base in Southwest Asia. Continued strikes are no doubt being planned and executed using Baidu as a targeting system. This system has no backdoors that the US or Israel can exploit. And given that it is under Chinese given that it is a Chinese system, it is unlikely that the US can do anything to persuade China to shut or limit this system. I also want to add that Iran's adaptability is not just on its missiles and by extension its drones targeting capability. Larry Johnson recently confirmed that China is sending weapons to Iran for battlefield testing. This is relatively unprecedented in this is relatively unprecedented in modern history. Chinese weapons previously were meant to defend a country using its domestic stockpiles, in addition to the Chinese imports. However, the length and severity of the second imposed war, along with the small break that the MOU provided, has given China a large amount of time, and data to process. And one of the moves they have selected is sending their own weapons over for the sake of battlefield testing, live battlefield testing too. It is it is quite possible that as we speak, Chinese weapons are being utilized against US military assets across Southwest Asia. There could have been any number of confirmed victories, any number of confirmed vehicles damaged or destroyed due to these weapon systems. And they are not simple, and they are likely not the simplistic weapon systems such as manpads. Most likely it could be a reference to Chinese electronic warfare, Chinese communications jamming, and possibly surface-to-air and surface-to-surface missile technology. But besides that, there was also the MOU itself. As I recently mentioned, there was a tentative deadline that was set by both China and Iran. For Monday last week. That week has come and gone, and so far nothing has happened. In the background, much did happen. Pepe Escobar explained how Iran did agree to a tentative 10-day ceasefire that could be extended, which effectively meant that Iran was returning to the MOU, but it would require the US to fulfill its commitments to the MOU immediately, starting with the removal of Iranian oil sanctions that were recently reimposed, the removal of its own blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, the the ceasing the return of Iranian assets that had belonged to Iran but were in Qatari, Emirati, and other banks, and perhaps most importantly, the cessation of Israeli aggression in Lebanon. The US, however, rejected, despite all attempts to the despite all attempts at pestering Pakistan to deliver, and Pakistan did deliver, the US chose to reject this. It comes as no more or less no surprise to those in Iran and throughout Southwest Asia that the US chose to do so, as the MOU is essentially a surrender document. It stops the US from continuing its aggression against Iran. It stops the blocking of Iranian oil exports, and perhaps most importantly to the US at least, it stops Israel from continuing its own campaign in Lebanon, a campaign that has come after the failed invasion of Gaza and similar failures across the West Bank. We will, of course, see what the actual ramifications are. Given that the MOU is no longer in effect, there has been already a reduction in oil being through shipped over, whether it is through this Gulf, whether it is through the Persian Gulf, or more recently the Bab al Mandab. But we will return to that shortly. I want to mention very quickly that whilst Iran has continued attacking US bases, it has avoided destroying any Arab infrastructure. And as it is proceeding with destroying these US bases thoroughly via targeted missile strikes, it has also attacked US bases in the Kurdistan region in Iraq and Jordan. These two places were previously off limits, one could say, in the initial 2 months. Now Iran's targeting has expanded to the Kurdistan region and Jordan, squeezing all US assets that had previously been stationed in the UAE and Saudi Arabia that had evacuated there, and are now forcing them to make the move to either leave for Europe or, among their last bases, Israel. There has been a lot of speculation on Iran's nuclear posture. Indeed, we have not seen a nuclear device detonation, but there has always been a plan. Professor Mohammad Marandi explains that Iran's nuclear posture was always subject to review. He recalls how the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, Ali Larijani, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs 1990s, Kamal Kharzi, stated that if Iran faces an existential threat, it will revise its nuclear posture. That existential threat has arrived. At no point in the Islamic Republic of Iran's 47 years has it reached anything close to the kind of threats, damage, and destruction to both lives, public and private property that it is facing right now, all of which is televised for the world to see. This of course means that the this of course means that Iran's nuclear posture, being subject to review, was always fluid. And whilst Grand Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's fatwa on the ban of nuclear weapons still stands, a review may be may be called in this year or next. We will see. But no matter what, there is no doubt that the decision will carry very heavy support from the public, as they have called for one singular demand throughout Grand Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and his family's funeral: revenge. I will now like to turn to Yemen. As many have as you might recall, Ansarullah had declared a complete blockade of Saudi Arabia in retaliation to Saudi Arabia's own 12-year blockade on Yemen. Bab al-Mandab is closed to any ships docking at Saudi Arabia or heading for Israel. Pepe Escobar asserts that for Saudi Arabia to remove its own blockade on Yemen silently would involve a level of diplomatic finesse that Saudi Arabia does not have with Yemen. And this I agree with. Saudi Arabia has just lost its best chance to completely settle the situation. It had a ceasefire with Ansarullah in 2022 that had held up until quite recently. The Sana'a International Airport bombing just a week or so ago had completely destroyed that. that had completely destroyed any peaceful overtures towards Ansarullah. GCC diplomatic intervention could have also de-escalated this situation after the bombing, but its member states remained spineless in the face of Saudi pressure. Pepe Escobar also states that Yemen retains the ability to block the Bab al-Mandab to all shipping, yet it has allowed tankers docking in Saudi Arabia to continue through the Bab al-Mandab as long as their destination is China. As you can see, Ansarullah have maintained their ties with not just the axis of resistance, but with the greater global south. It is important to remember that China, whilst not an OPEC or OPEC Plus member, does have very serious control over the oil price as the main purchaser globally of oil. And given that it has the world's largest reserve, a simple order in bulk could drastically decrease oil stocks across Southwest Asia, thereby cranking up the oil prices to levels unseen, or worse, levels that cannot be intervened through financial speculation that is rampant in Washington and that is rampant in Wall Street and London, thereby reducing Washington's control over Chinese imports. Additionally, Pepe Escobar confirmed that Yemen's blockade was done on the basis of Yemeni and Iranian intelligence. They confirmed that a new phase in the campaign against the axis of resistance was about to be initiated. The blockade was meant to preempt this. It forced Saudi Arabia to show its hand. I will go into further details as much as happened. For instance, Saudi Arabia had bombed Al Hudaydah as well, and the bombing simply did not stop, as Ansarullah's retaliation showed. But before that, I would like to add Pakistan's role. Pepe Escobar asserted that Pakistan will not act against Sana'a in accordance with the Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement, or the SMDA. In, and I would also like to recall how in 2015, Pakistan's National Assembly voted unanimously to stay out of the Yemeni civil war. There, however, that did not stop Saudi Arabia from bombing Al Hudaydah airport. Yemen retaliated by striking Jizan oil refinery, a property of the Saudi Arabian oil company, Saudi Aramco. As for oil transits, Major Scott Ritter explains that the Yemeni blockade has caused oil exports to decline to zero as a whole, by the way. It is not just the oil in the Bab al Mandab, but add to that the deterioration of the MOU has but add to that the deterioration of the MOU. If the situation is not reversed, Saudi Arabia could collapse from the lack of oil revenue, its main and indeed its only major export. But it has no diplomatic cards to play, he added. And this is quite a serious situation. If it continues, Saudi Arabia might share a similar fate as outrageous and as apocalyptic even as it might sound with the UAE and Bahrain. By contrast, Kuwait was always a territory of Iraq, and there are public sentiments to back that, and there are public sentiments that might act on that. But the UAE may be forced to go its own path. It is an open question if Oman would even accept the UAE back. We will see just how the tribal situation in Saudi Arabia pushes and pulls the country and in what direction it goes. It should be remembered, of course, that the Al Saud family is not monolithic. Various princes will be vying for power, and not all of them will be supportive of the US, but not all of them will be supportive of the axis of resistance. So far, under President Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia has tried to side with both the US and with BRICS multiple times. It has until recently continued to sell oil in petrodollars, but it has also accepted petro-yuan. It was nominated for BRICS, but it never accepted. And so far, to my knowledge at least, it has never attended any BRICS conferences. The recent airstrikes on Yemen have only compounded Saudi Arabia's complex complex relationship, a relationship that threatens to tear the country apart along tribal lines, along with others. But before I continue, I would also like to mention how I would like to mention how Israel has been faring, as it has been caught in quite the bind. As some might remember, earlier in the second imposed war, two of Israel's major refineries, both of which process sulfurous Azerbaijani crude, one in Ashdod and the larger one in Haifa, were both damaged early on. The damage has not been repaired, so they cannot operate at full capacity. And if it is not clear, these are Israel's only two oil refineries, meaning any further damage or destruction would severely curtail any any normal functioning of the Israeli economy, let alone any military operation. This precarious situation, combined with the collection of US assets in Israeli bases, make it quite the attractive target for Iranian missiles. This explains why Israel has become reluctant of incoming US forces. This can be seen in various this can be seen in various public official statements as they continue to as they continue to cheer on the US's efforts whilst maintaining silence essentially on their own lack of involvement. With the damage with these damaged oil refineries, Israel cannot resupply or defend. Israel cannot resupply US assets, nor can it defend these new assets, as we had seen previously in Operation Rising Lion, and was seen much and was seen early on in the second imposed war, when Iranian missiles could enter the airspaces of both Jordan and Israel unopposed. Additionally, the US itself cannot refuel Israeli bases either, because it is facing its own fuel crisis. It needs it needs fuel for its own aircraft, for its own missions, but it also needs them for the basic everyday operating and resupplying of their own forces in in Israel and Jordan. I also want to add one more point that many people might not know, but Hamas is not a monolith either. Early on, if anyone had been listening to Brian Berletic or some of the other sources that I follow, you would know that Hamas had serious ties to that Hamas had serious ties to Mossad, given that it erupted in the 1980s at a time when Operation Cyclone was going on in Afghanistan. During that time, Hamas was posed as a resistance organization that was contrary to the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO, at the time. Over the years, Hamas, which used to be led by Khalid Mash'al, has seen many changes. It has shifted drastically from previously supporting the from previously supporting the from previously supporting Operation Timber Sycamore and the jihadists associated with it to now supporting the to until recently supporting the Syrian Arab Republic's government and the Syrian Arab Army. And that trend had strengthened. Although Khalid Mash'al took power quite recently after the deaths of Ismail Hania and Yahya Sinwar, the new chairman, Professor Muhammad Marandi, confirms Khalil al Haya is a man of sound character. This is a serious blow to Israel's attempts to manipulate Hamas from within. He came to power quite recently, uh, either this year, or this month, or last month. So he has quite big shoes to fill. Hamas is still under an Israeli blockade across Gaza, and it continues, and it may face resistance from within. We will see how this new chairman reacts to the situation, how he can exploit the various opportunities presented to him, and perhaps most importantly, how he can support the axis of resistance. Additionally, Professor Muhammad Marandi asserts that Iran should not attack Israel at this moment because its internal politics are becoming more divisive in the face of the October 2026 Knesset elections. Attacking Israel now would add cohesion to a divided society. And this I agree with vehemently. No matter how divided a country is from the inside, an external party, especially one as especially one as despised as Iran, would no doubt solidify the fractured political parties in Israeli politics. It was one of the biggest critiques Brian Berletic had of of Hamas when it initiated Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, as at the time Israel was experiencing widespread protests against Benjamin Netanyahu's flagrant crimes and his blatant attempts to manipulate the Israeli court system. If Iran finds a way to hold its fire until, at the very least, after the October elections, it could provide them with it could provide Iran with it could seriously aid Iran in its in destroy it could seriously aid Iran in introducing instability. Remember that these Knesset elections are essential for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's hold on power. If his party loses, he goes to jail. So he will try everything in his power to stop that from happening. He has already initiated a blockade. He has already assaulted Gaza and Lebanon and most recently Iran for this very reason. All of this, all of this lets me segue into an intriguing point. The US has experienced severe strategic decline in its thinking, has experienced significant strategic decline. Its cognition, its ability to research and come up with solutions strategically in Southwest Asia, among other regions, has been severely hampered. It comes as no surprise that some of the most important cold warriors of the time, of 1990, of some of the most important cold warriors, such as George Kennan, among others, advocated that the US develop friendly relations with Russia in a bid to strengthen peace, an unprecedented period of peace that had broken out quite suddenly after the collapse of the USSR. Those those overtures, you know, despite their despite their genuine nature, never truly materialized. Similar overtures towards China proved to be a fraud. And now and now we have seen similar a similar situation with the US's actions towards both the JCPOA and the MOU. But this is but this is not just disadvantageous to Russia, China, and Iran's own situations. It is, as I have stressed, a severe degradation to the US's capabilities. Without such thought, it is impossible for the US to critique its own decision-making centers. Most important of all being, of course, President Donald John's decisions. And in a war with no stated goals, as the second imposed war is, the US is left in quite the bind, both politically and in the public sphere. I also want to add that coming back to my previous point of the House of Saud, Colonel Lawrence Wilkinson warned that Iran could be the main reason why the House of Saud falls from power, and that is the and that and in that the US bears full responsibility. It let the situation happen. It sought a confrontation with Iran, and they got what they wanted, but not in the way they had intended. Iran will now grow into a powerful regional force that now commands critical trade routes. The Persian, the Persian Gulf, the International North-South Transportation Corridor, and the along with trade through the Caspian Sea. This leaves Saudi Arabia's oil-dependent economy, of course, at Iran's mercy. I would like to conclude by adding something very interesting something very insightful. Larry Johnson recently he recently aired. He explained that the world is experiencing an extraordinary period in history. The US cannot pursue war, and it is now facing a critical deficit in missiles of all kinds. These missiles all need rare earths to be manufactured. Manufacturing, of course, is done in China, and these semi-manufactured components China is withholding. Iran is also forcing the US out of Southwest Asia. The missile attacks that Iran unleashes now only have a minute of advance warning at best. And it is important to note that there is not a single country in this entire war that is helping the US out of its latest quagmire. And I would like to contend that this will go on up until the war's end. There has been no serious intervention either from the EU, the UK, or even Israel, thus forcing the US to essentially find its own path. The only off-ramp it had, the MOU, was just rejected. That leaves it in a kind of conflict where it has no weapons, no bases, and no allies. It is then no wonder why Professor Mohammad Marandi keeps reiterating how Iranians would want a US ground assault. It would be a slaughter on a scale not seen since perhaps the beginning of the SMO, or if I am being generous, the first year, 2022. I would also like to add an important note. I wish to thank Sheikh Imran Hosein on behalf of the contemplative people of Pakistan and the Muslims of South and Southwest Asia for writing his latest book, The Quran and Pakistan's Destiny. I expect it to be a compelling book that should enable greater introspection within the Pakistani people at a time when its citizens have next to no historical identity due to the lack of a lack of collective identity and memory. I hope that this would engender them to consider more deeply their relationship with Islam also, as it is a religion that is, of course, one of action and not just words. And whilst the 5 pillars are essential to the faith, so is contemplation, research, studying, and of course teaching. And that Sheikh Imran Hosein and I hope I have demonstrated quite well. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to your comments. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.